At the outset of the narrative, the story opens with a first-person account from Bobby, who sets the stage by describing his personal life and environment. The timestamp, midnight to 0:37, immediately situates the listener in a moment of calm and routine. Bobby introduces himself and his upscale neighborhood, a detail that frames his expectations of security and acceptance. By emphasizing that he works hard and has achieved the goal of owning a home with a long driveway, he not only establishes his personal character as diligent and successful but also highlights the value he places on his property's safety. The mention of having a HOA-approved gate introduces an institutional element, one that represents both local norms and the expectations of conformity within the neighborhood. Bobby's careful attention to detail is further underlined when he talks about watering his roses. His focus on his garden illustrates a personal pride and a desire for beauty and tranquility in his surroundings. The fact that he invites judgment on his roses, "Don't judge, they're gorgeous," serves as a metaphor for his overall approach to life, one that emphasizes merit and effort. Here, his narrative voice strikes a balance between self-assurance and vulnerability. He proudly talks about his accomplishments yet remains open to the inherent risks of living in a community where appearances and security measures play critical roles. As the narrative unfolds, Bobby notices a stranger standing at the foot of his driveway. This woman, later identified as Karen in later parts of the story, is immediately described through her physical demeanor, arms crossed and an expression so sour it seems as if she just swallowed a lemon. Her presence is unexpected and jarring in contrast to the serene domestic scene that Bobby has established. Her arrival is abrupt, and her appearance, marked by disapproval, immediately raises the stakes. The way Bobby interprets her presence initially, as someone perhaps lost or even canvassing for a local politician, demonstrates his open-mindedness and willingness to assume the best of unfamiliar situations. However, the eventual eruption of yelling soon shatters the calm. Even in these first moments, there is a palpable tension introduced into the scene. This tension is not directly because of any physical threat but is social and symbolic in nature. It hints at underlying issues that transcend mere neighborhood aesthetics. The significance of the HOA in this context is twofold. On one level, it represents community standards and security for homeowners like Bobby. On another level, it becomes a pivot for contentious debates that surface when personal security measures are misinterpreted through the lens of bias. Thus, Part 1 serves as a microcosm of the larger narrative's themes. It introduces the audience to the main character, Bobby, whose hard-earned security is both a source of pride and an inadvertent flashpoint for conflict. Karen's initial, disapproving presence not only creates an immediate interpersonal conflict but also subtly sets up deeper social commentary regarding race and community acceptance. By drawing a vivid picture of a peaceful, meticulously maintained environment disrupted by unfounded accusations, the narrative invites the audience to reflect on the intersections of personal security, social bias, and the role of established systems, like the HOA, in shaping public perceptions. This opening segment masterfully lays the groundwork for the unfolding drama, highlighting that even in an upscale neighborhood, systemic issues such as prejudice can emerge when personal security measures are misinterpreted or weaponized against individuals. After a quiet start to his morning, Bobby continued tending to his lush garden and carefully watering his prized roses. The comfort of his upscale neighborhood and the security afforded by his legally approved gate had always been a source of pride to him. However, his tranquil routine was quickly interrupted when he noticed a woman, Karen, standing at the foot of his driveway. Her posture was unmistakable, arms crossed, an expression of extreme disapproval etched onto her face, as if she had just swallowed a sour lemon. Bobby, always courteous and assuming the best in people, greeted Karen with a friendly wave. He initially presumed she might be lost or perhaps canvassing for a local cause, given the unusual circumstances of her appearance. But before he could return to his roses, his peaceful moment shattered. A sudden eruption of yelling sliced through the calm air. Karen's voice rang out, high-pitched and piercing, filled with indignation and accusation. "Ridiculous! Absolutely ridiculous," Karen shrieked at the top of her lungs. The words spilled forth rapidly, accusing Bobby's well-kept gate of being an eyesore and a blight on the neighborhood. She berated him for erecting what she deemed an excessive fortress that, in her view, suggested he was trying to hide something nefarious behind those imposing bars. The scene unfolded in front of Bobby's immaculate driveway, with Karen's vocal tirade leaving little room for any misunderstanding. Bobby, though startled, maintained a respectful tone as he approached her, intent on diffusing what he hoped was just a momentary misunderstanding. He asked calmly, "Ma'am, is everything all right?" trying to bridge the growing tension with a note of reason. Yet, the answer that met him was a glare fueled by anger and a conviction that his protective measure was nothing more than a provocation. Karen's face reddened further as she retorted with a stinging accusation that the gate was not only disproportionate but also a potential threat. Her words, brimming with hostility, carried an undercurrent of prejudice that Bobby had unfortunately come to recognize too well. Despite his gentle attempts to explain that the gate was there solely for his security, and that it fully complied with the local HOA regulations, Karen refused to be placated. For her, it wasn't just about a physical barrier, it was an emblem of suspicion and fear. As Karen continued her barrage of invective, making snide comments about excessive security and insinuating that something was amiss simply because of the gate's appearance, Bobby's heart sank. In that brief and explosive moment, the seed of deeper conflict was unmistakably sown. Bobby realized that Karen's reaction was not motivated solely by a concern for neighborhood aesthetics or even genuine safety issues. It was rooted in a troubling intolerance that singled him out. This initial confrontation, marked by raised voices and the public airing of baseless accusations, set the tone for what would become a harrowing ordeal. Standing in his own driveway, with his roses trembling in the morning breeze, Bobby braced himself for the storm that was about to escalate beyond a simple disagreement over a gate. In the wake of the initial outburst, Karen's harsh accusations grew even more impassioned. While Bobby maintained his calm, Karen's rant escalated from mere criticism of the gate's aesthetics to demeaning accusations that struck at the core of Bobby's identity as a homeowner in this affluent neighborhood. With a sneer, Karen leveled claims that the gate was not just excessive, but also an indication of something suspicious and unwarranted. She barked that this so-called barrier was a blight on the neighborhood and demanded that it be taken down immediately. Bobby, whose only goal had been to secure his property and maintain peace of mind, found himself caught in the crossfire of unspoken bias. "This gate is here for my security and comes fully approved by the HOA, he explained evenly, his tone embodying both his frustration and his resolve to stand by what was legally his. Yet, Karen scoffed at the mention of regulations, dismissing them entirely. For her, the rules were less important than her personal sense of what was right or acceptable, a sentiment that betrayed a deeper discomfort with having a black family enjoying the privileges of this upscale area. The conversation, charged with tension, quickly revealed that Karen's issue was not with the physical structure of the gate but with what it symbolized. To her, the gate represented a perceived attempt by Bobby to isolate himself or, worse yet, to hide behind it. As she gesticulated wildly, her face contorted in anger, Karen insinuated that such stringent security was both unnecessary and inherently threatening. Every word she uttered dripped with the bias and prejudice that had become all too familiar in similar encounters. Bobby's heart pounded as he realized that no amount of measured explanation or legal validation could sway her hardened beliefs. The gate, a structure meant to protect his home and loved ones, had inexplicably become the battleground for a dispute about community, trust, and identity. With every verbal barb, it was clear that Karen's attack was not solely on the tangible barrier before her, it was an assault on the very idea that Bobby, as a black man, belonged in this predominantly white neighborhood. This exchange, lasting only a few intense moments, left Bobby reeling with a mix of anger, sadness, and resignation. He sensed that the conflict had escalated beyond a matter of neighborhood decorum and had instead morphed into an unyielding stand against the everyday prejudices he had long endured. As Karen's shouts echoed off the manicured lawns and elegant homes lining the street, Bobby's mind raced through the irony of the situation, how a symbol of personal security and hard-earned success could so easily be twisted into a weapon of discrimination. Though Bobby tried to reason with Karen, her words were a relentless cascade of unfounded assertions and veiled threats. In that charged moment, the true nature of the confrontation emerged. It was less about a dispute over a physical gate and more about the invisible barriers of bias that continue to divide communities. This realization hit Bobby hard, reaffirming the painful reality that even in an affluent, secure neighborhood, stereotypes and prejudices could rear their ugly heads. The confrontation reached a shocking turning point shortly after Karen's tirade of accusations. As the heated exchange continued, Karen abruptly whipped out her smartphone, her eyes flashing with a mix of indignation and resolve. With a deliberate motion, she pointed the device directly at Bobby, her scornful gaze intensifying with every passing second. "I'm calling the police," she declared with a triumphant sneer, convinced that her version of events would soon receive official validation. In her mind, this call to authority was not merely a reaction to excessive security, it was a weapon aimed at undermining Bobby's right to a safe and peaceful home. Bobby watched in stunned silence as Karen's fingers danced over the screen, dialing 911 without hesitation. In that moment, the air around them seemed to electrify with the tension of an impending storm. Neighbors began peering from behind drawn curtains and half-open windows. Their faces revealed a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and, in some cases, a trace of silent judgment. It was clear to everyone watching that this was no ordinary complaint about neighborhood decorum. The situation was charged with emotion, discrimination, and a volatile sense of entitlement. While Karen's call was underway, she continued to launch into a wild, disjointed narrative over the phone. Her voice oscillated between shrill accusations and inflammatory claims. Phrases such as suspicious activity, excessive security, and doesn't belong here punctuated her impassioned monologue. Each word she uttered was loaded with a deep-seated bias, a litany of grievances that transcended any legitimate concern about community safety. For Karen, Bobby's gate was a symbol of all that was wrong with the neighborhood, an emblem of isolation and a marker of difference that she felt compelled to confront head-on. Bobby, standing in the soft light of dawn and surrounded by the tender blooms of his rose garden, could only watch as the scene unfolded. His expression was a mask of stoic resignation, yet inside he felt the sting of every baseless accusation. His mind raced through memories of previous encounters marked by subtle prejudices and overt hostility, each a reminder that even the most peaceful moments could be violently disrupted by intolerance. The intrusion of Karen's voice, amplified by the impending arrival of law enforcement, threatened to shatter the sanctuary of his everyday life. As Karen continued her animated recitation to the dispatcher, her speech punctuated by the rapid-fire delivery of discriminatory slogans, Bobby observed the subtle reactions of the neighbors. Some exchanged sympathetic glances, while others hung their heads in embarrassed resignation. Their silent witnesses underscored a community divided by underlying prejudices that had long simmered beneath a veneer of affluence and sophistication. In that brief period, what could have been a mere misunderstanding had morphed into a public spectacle, a battle of wills where authority and rightful security were at stake. Deep within, Bobby understood that Karen's call was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of many years of unspoken mistrust and racial bias creeping into even the most secure neighborhoods. The stark reality was that Karen saw Bobby's protective gate not as a necessary measure for his safety, but as a statement, a provocative, unwarranted challenge to the status quo that she was determined to uphold. When the distant sound of an approaching siren finally sliced through the air, both Bobby and the silent onlookers braced for what was to come. The promise of law enforcement arriving on the scene was bittersweet. While it might resolve the immediate conflict, it also meant that the underlying issues of prejudice and intolerance were about to be exposed to official scrutiny. In that charged moment, as Karen's frustrated final words lingered in the cool morning air, Bobby resolved to remain calm, even as his heart pounded with a mix of anger and sorrow at the unfolding injustice. Within minutes of Karen's frantic call, the sound of approaching sirens reverberated through the still morning air, signaling the imminent arrival of law enforcement. 2 officers pulled up in a patrol car, their presence immediately commanding attention. Officer Matthews, a composed and experienced female officer, stepped forward first, her calm yet authoritative tone setting the stage for what was to come. Alongside her was Officer Johnson, a man known for his diligence and fair judgment. Together, they approached the scene with measured caution. Officer Matthews addressed Karen directly. "Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance." Her tone was even, designed to diffuse rather than inflame the situation. At that moment, Karen resumed her aggressive stance, gesturing vehemently toward Bobby's gate. Her voice, still fueled by indignation, repeated the familiar refrain: the gate was excessive and posed a threat to the neighborhood's tranquility. It was clear that her narrative, crafted on a foundation of personal bias, had become as much about stereotype as it was about security. Meanwhile, Bobby stepped forward to offer his side of the story. With quiet dignity, he explained that he was the homeowner and that his gate had been legally approved by the HOA. He pointed out that many other houses in the area boasted similar, if not identical, security measures. His words were matter of fact, underscored by a sincere desire to correct the misinformation. He stressed that the gate's purpose was solely to ensure his family's safety and to safeguard his property, emphasizing that there was nothing suspicious or subversive about having a secure entrance. Officer Matthews listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mix of professionalism and empathy. She requested Bobby's identification and proof of residency, which he provided without hesitation. As she verified his details using the patrol car's computer, the officers surveyed the scene. Officer Johnson took the opportunity to walk slowly along the gate, running a careful hand over the metal and peering through the narrow spaces, as if inspecting it for any irregularities. His actions were deliberate, designed to corroborate Bobby's assertion that everything was in proper order. Karen, however, was not appeased. Frustrated by the officer's impartial inquiries, she escalated her accusations even further. "I bet there's something hidden in there," she bellowed, her voice rising with each word. "He must be hiding drugs or illegal weapons." Her outrageous claims prompted a subtle shift in the officer's demeanor. Officer Johnson exchanged a brief, serious glance with Officer Matthews as if the very suggestion carried an implication that could not be overlooked. Despite Karen's attempt to steer the investigation toward an unfounded search, Officer Matthews maintained her composure. "Feeling unsafe is not a crime without concrete evidence of wrongdoing," she reminded her sharply. As she entered Karen's details into the system for a formal report, the atmosphere around the property grew tense. The neighbors, who had been hidden behind their curtains, now watched openly, their faces reflecting a mix of concern and reluctant approval. They, too, had long suspected that Karen's objections were rooted in personal prejudice rather than any legitimate safety concern. The initial phase of the investigation carried on with a methodical calm. Officer Matthews rechecked Bobby's records, confirming that his property and gate fully complied with local regulations. Officer Johnson's inspection of the gate reaffirmed that it was constructed to standard. As the officers moved to complete their report, a quiet understanding settled over the scene. Despite Karen's loud accusations, the evidence clearly supported Bobby's account. In that moment, the impartiality of law enforcement shone through, underscoring the fact that objective verification could cut through even the most vehement expressions of bias. The police presence, while necessary to establish order, also lent an ironic weight to the proceedings. Here was a confrontation that began with an impulsive call driven by racial prejudice, now being methodically dismantled by officers whose duty was to preserve justice without succumbing to hysteria. The entire episode, captured in real time by onlooking neighbors, was quickly evolving into a decisive moment in which truth prevailed over unfounded fear. In the midst of it all, Bobby's calm resolve was unshaken. Even as Karen's voice trailed off into a mumble of accusations, the officer's clear, measured actions painted a picture of a system working as it should. The tension of those charged moments slowly began to dissipate, replaced by the reassuring order of a proper investigation. With every official inquiry, the narrative was being reshaped, one that affirmed Bobby's right to security and respect, and laid bare the unfounded nature of Karen's claims. As the investigation continued, the officers transitioned from routine verification to a more probing inquiry into the validity of Karen's claims. With Bobby's identification confirmed and his property details duly recorded, the focus began shifting from the structure of the gate to the nature of Karen's accusations. Officer Matthews now turned her attention directly to Karen, her expression steely yet controlled. "Ma'am, could you please state your full name and address for the official report?" she requested, her tone leaving little room for further embellishment. Reluctantly, Karen complied. Her response was filled with haughty disdain as she rattled off her personal details in a manner that suggested she believed she was in charge of the situation. All the while, Officer Johnson continued his careful scrutiny of the gate, running his hand along the cool metal and inspecting every detail with the precision of someone who had seen far too much to be easily swayed by mere accusations. In the intervening moments, a hushed tension settled over the scene. The officers began discussing their next steps in quiet, measured tones, their voices barely audible over the residual murmurs of the gathering crowd. It was then that Officer Matthews' computer chimed with a sharp beep, a sound that signified an unexpected twist in the unfolding narrative. Her eyes widened as she exchanged a brief but loaded glance with Officer Johnson. The information on the screen revealed something that neither Karen nor anyone else present had anticipated. An outstanding arrest warrant was linked to Karen for charges of embezzlement. The revelation struck the group like a sudden chill. In that instant, Karen's previously aggressive demeanor faltered. Her eyes darted nervously, and she sputtered in disbelief. "That's impossible. I haven't done anything wrong," she managed to stammer, though her voice now lacked its former venom. Officer Matthews, now speaking with a clear edge of finality, confirmed the details in a measured yet firm tone. "Apparently, you have been siphoning funds from your workplace for several months. The warrant is for embezzlement." Witnessing the rapid unraveling of her carefully constructed narrative, Karen's previously defiant posture crumbled. Officer Johnson stepped forward decisively. In a few swift, coordinated movements, he placed her under arrest. The crowd that had gathered, a mix of shocked onlookers and relieved neighbors, watched silently as Karen, once a figure of vociferous indignation, was led toward the police cruiser. Her earlier outbursts of baseless accusations now seemed tragically ironic in light of the evidence against her. Bobby, standing quietly by his driveway throughout the entire ordeal, felt a blend of emotions. While there was a profound sense of vindication in witnessing justice take its course, there was also a deep sorrow at having to endure such public humiliation rooted in racial prejudice. The scene was a stark reminder that even in a neighborhood prized for its security and affluence, old prejudices could erupt in the most unexpected ways. As Karen was transported away in the patrol car, Officer Matthews took a moment to summarize the findings to the onlookers. Her explanation was precise. Not only was the gate perfectly compliant with HOA standards, but all evidence confirmed that Bobby's security measures were entirely justified. The focus, she emphasized, should now shift away from baseless complaints and toward the real issue: accountability for those who exploited the system for personal gain. The officer's thorough and impartial investigation underscored a crucial point: it wasn't the physical gate that posed a threat, but the unfounded fear and prejudice that had driven Karen to make such wild claims. Officer Johnson and Officer Matthews' professionalism helped restore order and clarify the narrative. The incident, initially staged as a dispute over property security, had rapidly transformed into a public exposure of malfeasance and racial bias. In those tense minutes, the fabric of the community was tested. Yet, through the diligent efforts of the law enforcement officers, the truth emerged starkly. The gathering crowd, now confronted with the realities of Karen's actions, began to murmur their support for Bobby. A man who had endured not only a personal affront but the cumulative weight of prejudice that had long simmered beneath the surface. The swift arrest of Karen served as a powerful statement that in this community, injustices, whether hidden or overt, would not be allowed to stand unchallenged. In the aftermath of Karen's arrest, the scene underwent a dramatic transformation. What began as a volatile standoff over a single gate quickly escalated into a full-blown public spectacle that reverberated far beyond Bobby's quiet, upscale neighborhood. As Officer Matthews methodically completed her report, documenting every detail of Karen's unraveled claims and the unexpected arrest, the murmurs from onlookers grew steadily louder, and neighbors began to emerge from behind their curtains. Among the onlookers were residents who had long harbored suspicions about Karen's motives. Slowly, they gathered near Bobby's driveway, sharing silent looks of relief and regret. Some whispered apologies to Bobby, acknowledging that they had suspected the true nature of Karen's attack all along. A few, emboldened by the day's unfolding events, began to voice their support for Bobby, someone who had been subjected to years of subtle prejudice and unjust accusations. For many in the community, the incident was a wake-up call. The spectacle of Karen's brazen confrontation, followed by her dramatic arrest for embezzlement, shined an unforgiving light on the dark undercurrents of bias that could thrive even in a neighborhood known for its order and affluence. Local residents recounted to each other how, over time, Karen had spread malicious rumors about Bobby and his family, insinuations that painted him in a negative light solely based on his race. As these whispered accounts surfaced, the collective sentiment among the neighbors shifted from cautious indifference to outspoken condemnation. Meanwhile, the professional handling of the case by Officer Matthews and Officer Johnson resonated with the community. Their calm, fact-based approach stood in stark contrast to Karen's irrational tirade, reinforcing the idea that objective truth should always prevail over unfounded fear and prejudice. In a brief moment of public address, Officer Matthews acknowledged that while the residents might have felt threatened by excessive security measures, it was evident that the real danger lay in the unchecked impulses of intolerance. As word of the incident spread, local news outlets descended upon the neighborhood. Cameras, microphones, and reporters quickly transformed what had been a tense standoff into a media event. Bobby, initially reluctant to be thrust into the spotlight, was eventually approached for interviews. In these conversations, he stressed that his goal had never been to incite controversy but simply to safeguard his home and ensure the well-being of his family. He spoke of the importance of community trust, calling for empathy and understanding rather than fear and suspicion. The media, captivated by the dramatic turn of events, amplified Bobby's quiet dignity and the subsequent arrest of Karen. Headlines emerged that both condemned Karen's baseless accusations and lauded the exemplary conduct of the local law enforcement officers. The narrative quickly evolved into a broader discussion about the persistence of racial prejudice in seemingly tranquil, affluent neighborhoods, a conversation that had far-reaching implications beyond the immediate borders of Bobby's community. For many observers, the episode was a stark reminder of how personal security measures, such as Bobby's well-maintained, HOA-approved gate, could be misconstrued as symbols of segregation when viewed through the lens of bias. It was a painful yet necessary catalyst for discussions about race, belonging, and the responsibilities of those entrusted with public safety. As the day wore on, the once disruptive events began to settle into the collective memory of the community. Neighbors, now more aware of the prejudices that could simmer beneath the surface, vowed to remain vigilant and supportive of one another. Though the incident had been ignited by Karen's unfounded claims, the unity and resilience it spurred promised to forge a stronger, more inclusive neighborhood in its aftermath. For Bobby, the experience reinforced that, in the end, truth and justice could prevail against even the most deeply entrenched biases, an outcome that brought a measure of solace amidst the lingering echoes of conflict. In the hours following Karen's arrest, as the dust settled on the dramatic events of the day, the full weight of the incident began to reverberate throughout the community. The once quiet streets now buzzed with conversation and speculation, not only among the neighbors but also within local media circles that had latched onto the story. Reporters and camera crews were now a frequent presence, capturing every detail of the unfolding drama. Bobby, still standing outside his driveway with his well-tended roses as silent witnesses, found himself at the center of an unanticipated spotlight. Local news anchors discussed the peculiar case of a woman who had not only called the police over a gated driveway but had also been arrested on charges of embezzlement and, more damningly, hate crimes. The narrative quickly shifted from a mere dispute over security to a powerful statement on racial prejudice in an affluent community. Many of the neighbors, emboldened by what they had witnessed, began speaking out. A few came forward to express their regret for having tolerated Karen's disruptive behavior for so long. Their testimonies revealed long-held suspicions about the true nature of her complaints and shed light on a pattern of discrimination that had quietly plagued the neighborhood. In these reflective conversations, Bobby listened with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, a recognition that even in a seemingly safe environment, intolerance could thrive. Officer Matthews later addressed the media, clarifying that the investigation had uncovered sufficient evidence not only to justify the initial intervention but also to prompt a broader review of complaints that had been long ignored. She reassured the public that the local law enforcement was committed to preventing incidents like these from recurring, emphasizing that every call to 911 was taken with the utmost seriousness. Her balanced statements helped to restore confidence among the residents, who now saw that accountability was indeed possible. As the day drew to a close, Bobby took a quiet moment to reflect on everything that had transpired. Despite the disruption and the sorrow it brought, there was a silver lining. The incident had awakened the community, prompting a renewed commitment to unity and vigilance against discrimination. The uproar in the media not only exposed the ugly reality of racial bias but also sparked conversations about the importance of upholding justice and mutual respect in every neighborhood. Though the physical scars of the day might fade with time, the memory of Karen's unwarranted aggression, and the swift, resolute response from both law enforcement and the community, would remain a powerful testament to the strength and resilience that had emerged from this difficult experience. For Bobby, keeping the gate was not just about security, it was a proud emblem of his right to live without fear, a symbol of his perseverance in the face of injustice. In the final chapter of this turbulent episode, the community slowly began to pick up the pieces of a day that had challenged not only individual beliefs but also the very foundations of social harmony. In the days that followed, reports of the incident dominated local headlines as the story of Karen's baseless accusations and dramatic arrest was dissected by both media pundits and community leaders alike. Bobby, having endured the public spectacle with a quiet dignity, found himself reflecting deeply on what the ordeal had meant, not just for him, but for everyone in the neighborhood. The intense media coverage and public discourse transformed the incident into a potent symbol of standing up to racial injustice. In interviews with several local outlets, Bobby spoke plainly about the importance of maintaining one's integrity in the face of baseless prejudice. He emphasized that his gate was not an instrument of division, but rather a necessary security measure that afforded him and his family the peace of mind they deserved. For many residents, this case served as a wake-up call. They realized that even in an upscale community governed by established rules like those enforced by the HOA, old prejudices can unexpectedly rear their ugly heads. Neighbors who had once remained silent began to voice their support for Bobby and their dismay at Karen's actions. Public apologies and heartfelt discussions emerged as part of a broader movement to foster inclusivity and reject the divisive rhetoric that had nearly ripped the community apart. Local law enforcement, too, played a pivotal role in shaping the narrative. Officers Matthews and Johnson, through their conscientious investigations, demonstrated that fairness and adherence to the law serve as a bulwark against the forces of hate. Their work not only dismantled the unfounded allegations but also highlighted that true safety is achieved not through fear, but through mutual respect and accountability. In the end, the resolution of the case, with Karen facing serious charges ranging from embezzlement to hate crimes, sent a clear message that discrimination would not be tolerated. As Bobby continued to care for his garden and maintain his home, he also embraced the knowledge that his quiet resilience had sparked a broader conversation about justice and community. His gate, once the flashpoint of a bitter confrontation, now stood as a proud emblem of his right to live safely and with dignity. For Bobby, the incident had forever changed his perspective. He had witnessed firsthand how a single act of bigotry could disrupt an entire community, yet he also saw the promise of change when individuals and institutions took a principled stand. As he looked toward a future marked by both hope and vigilance, Bobby's reflection was simple yet profound. Even the smallest symbol, a gate or a rose, can speak volumes about the values we uphold, and it is through our collective strength that true justice prevails.